Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are this evening closing out our 28th year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished, what they might be planning for the future. We have on all sorts of writers, poets, novelists, journalists, but also other brands of artists. We have had on actors and musicians, singers, sculptors. If you have an idea for an artist who might be a good guest on the Writer's Block, whether it's a writer or other variety of artist, please watch for our address at the end of the program. We would love to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming that comes out of Cape Ann TV for and about Cape Ann is a result of cable access television. You don't get that with Dish. You don't want to pick up your television with Dish. You stick with cable and get this good programming. It's a wonderful cultural asset. I'm happy tonight to say we do have a writer, a poet, and journalist who has been on the show before, Emma Romeo, making a return visit. And just to remind you a little bit of her background, I'm going to read a paragraph of description of her background from a book she discussed a couple of years ago, Renovation of the Moon, or Renovación de la Luna. Emma Romeo is a writer, environmental journalist, and poet. She emigrated from Cuba at the end of the 20th century and has published books with major houses in Spain, Mexico, and the United States. Her articles have appeared in international magazines such as National Geographic. Emma Romeo, welcome back to
Thank you very much for the invitation.
The Writer's Block.
It is always a pleasure to be here in the program.
Now, you're about to bring out a new book that's kind of a different emphasis than Renovación de la Luna or, I'm going to say it in English, Now That Life's Given Me a Minute, two of the books of poetry you spoke about before when you were on the show. This book is different. It's coming out just in a few weeks. Tell us about the new book, if you would.
Yes, it is different in the way that I am talking about Mexico, my experiences there, and also I go into the Mexican indigenous languages. All the languages that are spoken in Mexico at this time, besides Spanish.
Today?
Yes.
In 2018, how many languages are spoken in Mexico?
More than 60.
More than 60?
Yes, exactly. And if you go to Yucatan, it is very easy to be in contact with the Mayan language because you can hear that in markets, in the street. You can go to the little villages. Mexican languages are alive, and Mexican cultures, different cultures, are also alive. You can, if you go to the center of the country, Nahuatl, Otomí are languages you can hear, or in the region of Oaxaca, there is also other languages, Zapoteco, Mixteco, and definitely Maya is one of the languages that you can hear more if you go to this south region of Mexico.
You mentioned to me earlier that a number, how many people in Mexico speak Mayan?
Mayan, this is, I think, less than 1 million. I think it is about 800,000. And Nahuatl is more than 1 million, definitely.
No, more
than 1 million Nahuatl, the other language in the center. Yeah.
So Mayan and some of these other languages are very ancient.
Yes, and Maya is the second language spoken. Actually, Spanish, Nahuatl, Maya. This is the order of the, according to the numbers of people who speak the language.
Spanish, and what was the second again?
Nahuatl.
Nahuatl.
This is the language that was spoken that is spoken in the center of Mexico. in Mexico City, for example, in Puebla, in that region, you can hear Nahuatl easily, or you can go also to Michoacan, and there are communities of Purepecha Indians who have their culture very alive. There are words, for example, in this book. I started being interested in these subjects years ago, and there is one of the stories with the title Angatapu. Angatapu means tree, a tree, in Purepecha language. That is the language that is spoken in Michoacan, in the center of Mexico.
So
Yeah.
these languages would be learned by many children in Mexico as their
Yes.
first language.
Yes,
And
yes.
they learn Spanish only, well, perhaps when they go to school.
Yeah. It is possible to find people here, even in Massachusetts, who speak Maya. And the way they speak Spanish, in Yucatan, for example, there is a different intonation when people speak Spanish, and it comes from, in my opinion, from the language, from the Mayan language, when Mayan started to speak Spanish.
So you can tell if somebody has a Mayan accent in Spanish.
Yucatecan accent, yeah. Yes,
That's
yes.
very-
And probably you can find a person who has as a first language one of those indigenous languages, learning English, having that accent in English. But I haven't studied that, so I cannot.
Well, that's very interesting to me because I think most North Americans, if you hear about the Mayan culture, you read about the ruins and the tourists flocking to see the pyramids, and you think it's a completely dead culture.
Oh, no.
Long gone.
No. And in Yucatan, in la peninsula de Yucatan in Mexico, you have this situation. They speak Spanish and they use Mayan words into Spanish, and they adapt sometimes that Mayan word into Spanish, and they speak in a very peculiar way. And now that I was some time living there, I learned what they are saying something. They are talking in Spanish, but there is a word I didn't know before, and that comes from Maya, and I can identify that. And for example, in this book, I edited this book.
Okay. Let me hold this up. And so we're talking, I want to make sure our audience knows, we're talking about Mayan culture surviving and being vibrant and
Definitely.
alive
Yes.
in Mexico.
Yes.
This book is an illustration of that. This is a book that you edited.
Yes.
And would you tell me the title? I'm
This
not going
is
to try to...
La Chachalaca. This is the name of a bird. A bird similar to this one, but this is, of course, a representation. La Chachalaca y otros versos folclóricos de Yucatán. Folkloric poems.
So would you translate that for us?
Chachalaca, the name of the bird, and other folkloric verse.
And other...
I don't know, folklore, like typical verses or poems.
So this is a book of poetry.
Poetry
That, in Spanish.
in Spanish. I am the editor and the producer of the book. I published it here in Massachusetts. This is a book written by one famous author of the Mayan region. She is she doesn't write in Maya, she writes in Spanish, and she's a famous professor in the city of Mérida, but she uses the language as it is used in the city, using Mayan language, Mayan words into Spanish.
So this is Effie Luz Vasquez Lopez.
Effie Luz Vasquez Lopez. She's a famous professor in Mexico. From the school board or Secretaría de Educación, the education department of Mexico.
Yeah. la Secretaría de Educación de Mexico.
Exactly.
I knew that. Well, how did you get interested in exploring and promoting, as being a spokeswoman for Mayan culture?
It comes from my childhood. I was the queen of the Mayan in my school.
The Queen of the Mayans. What was that? How did you get by that title?
That was a kind of game we had when we were studying history in my school in Cuba. And there was one girl who was the queen of the Aztecas, and the other one the queen of the Incas, and I was of the Mayas.
So three queens?
Yes, but that is funny because life brought me to live there in the Mayan region when I was when I was working there as a journalist, and I went to live in the city of Mérida, and I was fascinated for the Mayan culture. I am fascinated.
That's where this professor
Yes,
teaches in there.
yes.
And did you tell everybody you were the queen?
Yes, definitely.
And they followed you, huh?
No, they don't do that easily. No. They love me, and we are really good. We have a good communication. We have a very nice contact. We are close.
Rapport, maybe you say, or rapport, you hit it off.
I don't get.
You got along well.
Well, I came to live to the city, and I felt immediately very well received by people there, and I started to make contacts in the city, to learn more about the cultures, the places around the city, and about the environment, because remember, I am an environmental journalist.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
I wrote about some animals who are from there, and plants, and I was working for a while.
Your education, I didn't mention that from your background in this introduction to this show, but your educational background is in environment and especially
Yes.
marine science, I think.
Yes, remember I have a combination very...
Yes.
Yeah.
Oceanography.
Oceanography,
Yes.
yes. I studied oceanography. I worked in the Academy of Sciences for 8 years as a technician, and then I became a journalist, environmental journalist, and I was working as a journalist, even as a collaborator with National Geographic in Mexico, and then I came here and I became a professor. I teach Spanish language, cultures, and I was teaching also biodiversity and the sound. Now I am not teaching biodiversity. I was teaching biodiversity and the sounds of nature.
The sounds.
The sounds, and that was amazing. Yeah, and I did that at Berkeley, so that was for musicians, so they can know better the sounds of the animals to use them in music. Yeah, but at this moment I am focused on writing about these subjects.
The book we held up earlier is on Mayan culture by another poet, and you are a publisher as well as a writer and editor. Can you tell us a little bit technically about how you go about as an editor putting a book together? Did you have to write to different authors? You have to read 1,000 books. How do you do that in a step-by-step way? I think a lot of our viewers would be interested in that.
Actually, my publishing house is very small. I am making, this is a personal effort to bring to the United States books like this, who can be used by teachers, professors who want to teach their student in Spanish original texts written by authors in Spanish, and in this case in Spanish using Mayan words. So this is authentic, something authentic. So I am making an effort to bring that here to the United States. I published another one. This is only an ebook, and this is from an author from Michoacán. He is a very well-known poet from Mexico, from the center of the country, and his name is Gaspar Aguilera. He's a very well-known poet, and I know them. I know these authors. I don't publish many books because this is a personal effort. And
it takes a great deal of time.
Yes, but once I start, and they give me the authorization to publish the book, and we make a contract, and I start working, it has a lot of work. For example, this beautiful cover, isn't it beautiful? This is it matches very well with the subject of the book. The bird is based on one chachalaca. Chachalaca is a bird very common in Yucatan, in this Mayan region. So the artist is from Cuba. His name.
The graphic art.
Yes.
Is a separate person.
Yes.
From a different country.
Yes.
So you have to bring them all together.
Yeah. He is Enrique Martinez Quique, and I also knew him because he did some of the works here. Not the illustration, but he made the composition and these two. So I have I know the authors, the designers, the illustrators. It's just to put everything together.
Is that fun? Do you like being a producer and an editor?
I like it, but it takes a lot of time. So I do that when I am very stimulated for one work. But I also have to write, and I have to publish my poetry books. I only publish poetry because my other books are published by publishing houses.
Different publishing houses.
Yes,
in Mexico and Spain.
And here in the United States.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, that's a good segue to your own writing. I want to get back to the book that's about to come out. And I want to make sure we get the title. What is the title of the book?
No title yet.
No, it's not titled. So you keep us in suspense.
Yes.
But it will be out late this spring or this summer. A new book, Emma, E-M-M-A, Romeu, R-O-M-E-U, and we'll be able to find that on Amazon.
In Amazon, yeah.
Barnes and Noble.
And in some of the bookstores here in Boston, in the Boston area, even here in Gloucester, there is a bookstore which carries my books. And the other books are in Harvard Square, in the Harvard Coop, Harvard Bookstore, Grolier, and in some of the bookstores here in the Boston area. Yeah.
Good. We'll make sure we look for that.
Thank you very much.
Earlier, before we went on, you were talking about a poem that you were thinking of reading from an earlier book of yours because it ties in with your new book and interest in Mayan culture. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about that poem? And then, if you would, you could read it for us.
Yeah, this is a poem. This is a very romantic poem. And I wrote it inspired by the Mayan imagination, things that I heard when I was there, and for the environment, definitely. Mm-hmm.
This is titled "The Queen and the Astronomer." Is this the Queen of the Mayan Queen?
Yes.
Is this, so you're
also inspired by
your
that.
Your aura is in this.
Yes. And do you want me to start?
So, are you going to read it in Spanish?
I would prefer you to read that in English because
Why don't you read in Spanish,
it is
and then
too
I will
long.
read it in English? How's that?
I can do that, but this is very long.
Well, we have 8 minutes.
Maybe you read that in English, and if I have time, I read that in Spanish.
Well, I would love to hear you read it in
All right.
Spanish, and
Yes.
then we'll see how we're doing.
La reina y el astrónomo. Soy, no. Mi nombre no lo digo, está inscrito en la piedra. Tan solo les advierto que fueron mis dominios los de ríos subterráneos, principales pirámides y seres sabios de astros. Y yo era la reina. Ni las flores abrían si yo no las miraba, los cenotes secaban si su agua no bebía, y los caminos blancos alisaban sus piedras para que mis sandalias les sirvieran de premio. En los días de lluvia, cuando los peces ciegos subían del abismo, los mancebos soñaban verme, olerme, tenerme en su hamaca en colores del fondo de la selva. Pero ni mi belleza, ni el poder de mi cetro hacían sonar alegre el musical silbido del dulce pajarillo chinchimbacal en mi alma. Y es que en esta reinaba un hombre cuya ciencia capturaba la altura, un cazador de estrellas, contador de las lunas. Era un orfebre astrónomo que hacía un calendario. Y él no tenía mirada que no fuera a sus cosmos o a la piedra que eterna indicaría los días. Sus manos no buscaban los senos de las otras, sus pasos no seguían ningún huipil amado, su boca no rogaba por amor de mujer. Mi rival era el cielo. Quizás si yo brillara más allá de ser reina, decían mis lamentos, y di brillo a mi pelo con aceites de palmas, me barnicé en secretos del bosque del Mayap, y me hice acompañar de los mucuis dorados, pero en vez de admirarme, él fijaba su vista en papel de copó para anotar las lunas, estelas y horas sol. Solo se regodeaba mi tan amado astrónomo cuando en su calendario hallaba precisión. Y yo perdí el juicio, desvariaba en las órdenes, mi corazón de reina languidecía de amor. Hasta que el equinoccio me trajo la respuesta a lo que cada siglo preguntaba a los dioses. Y me lancé al abismo del cenote sagrado, adornada en mis joyas de sublimes destellos, para que desde el fondo el señor Kukulcán, con mis bellos fulgores, me elevara a los cielos. Aquel era mi ruego. Así, un día mi astrónomo posaría sus ojos en una nueva estrella. No les digo mi nombre está en la piedra.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read the same poem in English now. The Queen and the Astronomer. I won't say my name. It's carved on the stone. But I'll tell you about my realm, the subterranean rivers, the great pyramids, and the beings who can read the stars. And I was the queen. If I wasn't watching, the flowers wouldn't open. If I didn't drink their water, the cenotes went dry. And my sandals were the white road's prize for smoothing their stones. In the rainy season, when the blind fish rose from the chasm, the young bachelors dreamed of seeing me, smelling me, holding me in their colored hammocks in the forest depths. But neither my beauty nor my scepter's power could make the small, sweet Chinchin Bacal's musical trill sound happily in my soul. And in my heart there reigned a man whose science conquered the heights, a hunter of stars, a counter of moons. He was an astronomer who made a calendar, and his every glance was aimed at his cosmos or at the eternal stone that announced the day. His hands didn't grope for women's breasts. Feet didn't follow some loved one's huipil. His lips didn't implore any woman's love. My rival was the sky. Maybe if my queenly radiance shone even farther away, I lamented. So I burnished my hair with palm oil and polished my skin with secrets from the woods and ordered my golden doves to fly beside me. But instead of admiring me, he fixed his eyes on his copo paper and noted the moons, stars, and solar hours. My adored astronomer was only happy when he proved his calendar was precise. And so I lost the contest. Ranted when I gave orders, my queen's heart languished from love until the equinox brought me the reply I'd sought from the gods at every cycle. And then, adorned in my sublimely sparkling jewels, I hurled myself into the chasm of the sacred cenote, so that from its depths Senor Kulkan would lift me to the skies. In my most dazzling radiance, that was my prayer, so that one day my astronomer would rest his eyes on a new star. I won't tell you my name. It's on the stone. That is a good romantic love story. Sad, sad. And I'm not familiar with that spelling of cenote.
Cenotes.
Cenote.
The cenotes are these holes in the earth, in the ground, that goes to the subterranean rivers. That is like windows to see the subterranean rivers.
Okay.
So in the Mayan region in Yucatan, there are no rivers on the on Earth. All the rivers are subterranean. You cannot see a river there.
Really?
Yeah, but there is a lot of water subterranean. Yeah, and to see them in these cenotes, they are in many cases like the entrance to a cave, and there are beautiful places, and the water is very, very clear, transparent.
Did you know when you wrote that poem that you were going to do the further book, the later book about Mayan culture?
Well, I have many projects about Mexico because I lived there for many years, and all the information I have from around the country when I travel around the country. So I have so many projects that in a way I knew this is one of the projects that I have to do. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you got to that project, and I'm looking forward to the book. We're almost out of time, so I want to thank you, Emma Romeu, for sharing with us your new project about exploring Mayan culture, living and thriving in southern Mexico, and about to bring out a book untitled. No, I won't tell you the name. I won't tell you the name.
It is in the stone.
About to come out slightly later in 2018. I'll look forward to that.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Joe.
I'd like to thank our television audience, too, for being with us. If you've learned something about the life of Mayan culture and Mayan language from Emma Romeu tonight, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.